Welcome to Giants Latest. Hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all things New York Giants. And I think you guys are going to really like what we're talking about this week and into next week, because what we're doing is this: going through every position on the roster, talking through all of the players that are on it, and what I think the depth chart is going to end up looking like. And the reason that I think this is a good exercise is because I have gotten so many questions about the offensive line and the amount of fans who are so concerned about the offensive line and that we don't have enough players, we don't have depth, we need this guy, we need that guy, etc. While I think that you can never have too many players and too much competition, you're only allowed 53 players on the roster. And as of right now, the Giants have 18 on the offensive line. So let's dive right into it and let's go ahead and get into each position. So, starting with the offensive line as a whole, like I said, there's 18 different players that the Giants have on the team. This is players from last year, veterans, UDFAs, and rookies. So the one thing that I really want to focus on is this, is that there is some decent depth there. And I think as we go through in each group, you'll see that. And you'll see that maybe it's a little bit in better shape than you think it is. And that's really what I want the point of this to be, is that if anyone's freaking out about the offensive line, I hope by the time this video is over, you are thinking, it's not as bad as I think it is, and maybe it will actually be good this year. I can't guarantee that, but that's my hope, okay? So let me know if you feel better about the offensive line at the end of this video. Let me know in the comments. Let's go ahead and get started with the centers, because as of right now, there are 4 on the roster. Obviously, John Michael Schmitz, who I think is going to be the starter. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, there are 3 other guys that we need to talk about. Number 1 is Jimmy Morrissey, who is 26 years old. He's been on the Giants for, this might be his 3rd year at this point. He played for the Steelers, and he played a couple snaps last year. He only had to play when there was an injury to JMS. And, you know, he wasn't great. He wasn't awful. I really want JMS to take it up a notch so we can feel good that he is the starting center of the future. And he just has dealt with so many inconsistencies, and, you know, the injuries obviously don't help. So I really want him to just showcase that he's the guy. Outside of Jimmy Morrissey, they also have Brian Hudson, who I believe was a UDFA signing, because I don't remember him being on the roster last year. He's only 24 years old. He's never played. I never saw him actually play for the Giants. But so I'm assuming that he must be a UDFA. So he is also someone else that's on the roster. And then lastly, we have a new UDFA signing, who is the former center for Ole Miss, who obviously snapped the ball to Jackson Dart, Reese McIntyre. So I think the best case scenario is that he is good enough to be JMS's backup. Now, I don't know if he has that capability, but I like the idea of him being able to do that, because obviously it's some familiarity to Jackson Dart, and I think that goes a long way. You know, we know that there is a reunion on this team from Purdue. Marcus Bowe and Tyrone Tracy Jr. both played at Purdue together, and I just think that having that type of reunion is awesome. Now we have 2 Penn State guys. We have Abdul Carter and Theo Johnson, so, you know, you're always going to have that sense of familiarity. And I just also think from a center and quarterback perspective, to have guys who have that connection and communication and rapport already is so important. And also, JMS, we don't really know if he's going to end up being the future. So I think it's a really good opportunity for Reese McIntyre to step in here and be the 2. As of right now, I think he's probably in the 3rd place spot with Brian Hudson. I think that from a depth chart perspective, from first to last, it's obviously JMS, Morrissey, and then I think McIntyre and Hudson are probably tied for a 3rd right now, and then they're going to be battling it out. So that's what I think the center position is going to look like this year. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the fact that Austin Schlottman and Aaron Stinney, they are listed as guards here, but they both have center flexibility, and so does Greg Van Roten. Now, I think GVR is going to end up being the starting right guard, so I'm not including him in the center talk, but they do have the flexibility to play center. So let's continue on guard, because 3 of the 6 guards also play center, which is great. So for guards, we have Jake Kubas, John Runyon, Greg Van Roten, Joshua Zudu, Austin Schlottman, and Aaron Stinney. So 6 guards right there. So I hope that kind of, going through this exercise and bringing the names, you're like, oh, I remember this guy. Okay, this guy, I know him. I know this about him, XYZ. So let's start with this. I think the starting left guard and the starting right guard are going to be the exact same last year, which is John Runyon and then Greg Van Roten. Now, the only difference is that I think that if Izzudu is good enough, or Neal is good enough. Now, I have Neal listed with the tackles right now, but we're going to move him to guard because if Neal is good enough, maybe he's going to be able to battle it out with GVR for the starting right guard. And I promise you, I'm not insane, but it's a conversation that we have to have, at least for now, until we see him on the field. And look, the best case scenario is that it works for Evan Neal because then it's good news for us, right? So I think this is what the depth chart is going to look at from a guard perspective. Let's start with left guard. I think it's going to be John Runyon is going to be the starter. I don't think there's any question about that. I think the backup for him is going to be Joshua Izzudu. And the reason that I say that is because last year in week 18, when the coaching staff finally made the decision to move Izzudu from tackle back to guard, he was starting at left guard. So I think they're going to keep it as that, and I think that is going to be the position that we see him in. Now, Kubas, I believe, plays both guard positions. So I'm going to put him as the number 3 for left guard and right guard because I think that he's going to have an opportunity to play both. And I think that he is going to be better than Schlotman and Stinney when we talk about backup guard positions. I think those guys are probably going to end up being practice squad. They're veterans, which is, I know, reasons why the Giants like them. They have flexibility at positions, which we also know the Giants love. But those guys played a little bit last year and they just weren't great. So I would be surprised if they are good enough to really duke it out for the backup role. Would it be great? Sure. Is that going to happen? I don't think so. Now, let's talk about right guard. So I have GVR as the starter right now, and I think ultimately it's going to come down to Kubas or Evan Neal. I think their plan is that they're going to focus Evan Neal at right guard because he obviously has spent time playing right tackle. Keep him on the right side. He could be next to a Luminor who's pretty steady as a right tackle. And then you've got Neal in between JMS and him who's going to feel, hopefully, like he's in a better position to succeed. So I think that Neal, their plan is that he's going to be the backup guard. GVR is going to be the starter, but he's going to have the opportunity to compete for the starting role. Whereas I think on the left guard, John Runyon is the starter. I don't think there's any severe competition for that. Could someone beat him out? Absolutely. Does anyone think that Izzudu is going to be better than John Runyon? Not me. That's for sure. So I think that's probably what it's going to end up looking like. And I think for the right guard, it's going to be GVR, Evan Neal, and Kubas. And it's probably going to be Neal and Kubas battling it out in camp unless he's going for the left guard. But we'll find out soon enough. Now, let's go ahead and move over to tackle because this is the last two pieces, of course, of the offensive line. So our tackles: Stone Forsythe, James Hudson III, Jermaine Illuminor, Marcus Bowe, Jason Williams, Evan Neal, Andrew Thomas, RJ Perry. Let's start with left tackle. Our king, Andrew Thomas. No questions about this. It is Andrew Thomas. He's the starter. No doubt about that. Now, for the backup position we have RJ Perry, who was a UDFA who played left tackle throughout his career in college. So I think he's going to be an option here. And I think Jason Williams, who is also a UDFA who played left tackle, I think those guys are going to be in the rotation. I also think that Forsythe and Hudson are going to be between left tackle and right tackle because I believe that they have experience playing both. So I think that those guys have a better opportunity to be swing tackles as opposed to just left tackle, just right tackle on the depth chart. So that's going to be my guess. So for left tackle, we've got Andrew Thomas, we've got RJ Perry and Jason Williams battling it out there. And then I think we've got Forsythe and James Hudson as our swing tackles. At right tackle, we've got Jermaine Illuminor. I don't think there's any question that he's the starter. Now, Marcus Bowe, who was the guard that they drafted from Purdue, they are starting him at right tackle. So I think their plan is that he's going to be the backup for Illuminor. I also think that their plan, if God forbid Andrew Thomas goes down again, I think instead of forcing Forsythe or Hudson into the left tackle role as the swing tackles, I think they will move Illuminor over to left tackle and bring in Marcus Bowe as the starter at right tackle. That is, I think, going to be their number one option. What I think could be a secondary option is keeping Illuminor at right tackle with Bowe as the backup until they feel like Bowe is ready to go. And they put in Jason Williams or RJ Perry as the left tackle. Because I don't think, I don't know, unless they feel like Forsythe or Hudson is good enough to start at left tackle. I know it's really hard to do this exercise because there's still so many question marks around these guys. But I do think that there is decent depth on this roster right now. I think there's more offensive linemen than a lot of people think. And I hope, like I said, just going through this exercise make you guys feel like, okay, we're not as in dire need as I thought we were. Now, do I feel like the Giants could and should sign more offensive linemen? Hell yeah, the more the merrier. And as we go through this exercise, there's still a lot of question marks, right? So why not bring in more competition? Why not really see what these guys are capable of giving you? And, they don't really have a lot of time to figure it out, right? They have OTAs where they don't have the pads on. They've got training camp where they have the pads on, but only certain days. It's not every day. And then you have preseason, where is your last final attempt to see whether or not these guys are capable enough to play week one. So I think it's going to be interesting, but I do think, they've got 18 players on here. I think they have an acceptable amount of options at each position. Because if, going through this list, you've got at least two, I would say at least even three players at every single position that if God forbid someone goes down, you have someone who has experience playing that exact position before. And I think that is the most important, and I think that's the best spot that we're in right now, because I think when you looked at this last year, it was, well, Azudu and Neal both played guard and tackle in college, but they're forcing Azudu into the tackle role, who was awful at it for 2 years in a row, if not more, and Neal, who was also bad at tackle. So they're finally moving them to guard, and the hope is that they're good guards right off the bat. But I feel like that alone, knowing that they are going to be guards this year, is immediately setting them up for success, and it's setting up this Giants offensive line for success, because now if God forbid Runyon or GVR goes down, you have guys who have played guard that you feel confident enough can go in there and can be a decent backup for the two guys that you lost. And it's the same thing at tackle, right? We've got Marcus Bowe this year, who they're lining up at tackle. You've got Perry and Williams and Hudson and Forsythe, all of these guys who have tackle experience. So I think, and I really hope that that's going to make the biggest difference this year as opposed to last year. And also, the starting offensive line was pretty decent before Andrew Thomas went down last year. So, and now, like I said, hopefully we have some good backup if Andrew Thomas goes down. In the meantime, I will be keeping my fingers crossed and praying that that is not a concern this year. So let me know, do you guys feel better about the offensive line? I hope so. And tomorrow we are going to dive into the D-line.